Hey, I'm Jesse. Let's have a devotion. We're in Ezra chapter 6. We're going to continue on, and you're going to see how God can turn your haters into advocates. Therefore, you must stay away from that place, Tattenai, governor of the region west of the Euphrates River, Shethar-bozenai, and your colleagues, the officials in the region. Leave the construction of the house of God alone. Let the governor and the elders of the Jews rebuild this house of God on its original site. If you haven't caught some of the past devotions here, as the book of Ezra unfolds and they continue the work of God reestablishing Old Testament worship post Babylonian captivity, they've come upon some haters. And these haters include this guy, Tattenai. He's over the Trans-Euphrates region, and Shethar-bozenai, and they have colleagues with them. These are the guys that showed up and asked to see the paperwork proving that they had authorization from King Cyrus of Persia to rebuild their temple. I hereby issue a decree concerning what you are to do so that the elders of the Jews can rebuild the house of God. Now, stick with me if this sounds familiar, because you're going to see how the book of Ezra goes on to encompass the full scope of everything that's happening in the book of Esther. You're going to see some familiar names. You're going to see how this the time frame here, it becomes a little bit anachronistic. It's possibly the last portion of the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah to have been written chronologically, because it encompasses all the way, through about a half century after the completion of the temple. It's going to name Artaxerxes, the son of Xerxes. The cost is to be paid in full to these men out of the royal revenues from the taxes of the region west of the Euphrates River. This is also kind of funny, because I think this would include Tattenai's jurisdiction, right? This means that Tattenai, the guy that tried to be a dude Karen and shut down construction of the temple, it's his constituents who would actually end up funding the construction of the house of God. So that the work will not stop. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, and lambs for burnt offerings to the God of the heavens, or wheat, salt, wine, and oil as requested by the priests in Jerusalem, let it be given to them every day without fail, so that they can offer sacrifices of pleasing aroma to the God of the heavens and pray for the life of the king and his sons. All right, so a couple of things about this. For one thing, you may have mixed emotions about the idea of the Persian government funding the offerings that are to be made, because then it's not really an offering, is it? Or if it costs you nothing, it's not really a sacrifice. And so you may have mixed emotions about that, but you can also see that this generous offer is given with a little bit of a pseudo-spiritual selfish motive. They're hoping that these people would pray, that the people of God would pray for the life of the king and his sons. See that? And he's not entirely wrong, actually. Even as New Testament believers, we have in the pastoral epistles this calling to pray for our governmental leaders. I also issue a decree concerning any man who interferes with this directive. Okay, now this is where our study in Esther is going to collide in a couple of clever ways. One, about the month of Adar, and then two, you're going to see the story of Haman kind of evoked in verse 11. This is what happens to the guy who interferes with the directive to let the Jews rebuild the house of God. Let a beam be torn from his house and raised up. He will be impaled on it, and his house will be made into a garbage dump because of this offense. May the God who caused his name to dwell there overthrow any king or people who dares to harm or interfere with this house of God in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have issued the decree. Let it be carried out diligently. All right. So we've seen the story of Haman already at this point in our series in Esther. And this may sound a little bit familiar, that he's to be impaled on a beam from his own house. And so you remember that Haman was hung on the gallows which he had constructed for Mordecai. And that's not unlike what would happen to anybody who interfered with the construction of the house of God, as per Ezra chapter 6, according to King Darius. All right, but we're going to go from the reign of King Darius through Xerxes all the way to Artaxerxes. Okay, here's what happens. Tath and I remember this was one of the dude Karens who showed up saying like, "Where's your permit?" And now he's actually been turned from a hater into an advocate. Then Tattenai, governor of the region west of the Euphrates River, Shethar-bozenai, and their colleagues diligently carried out what King Darius had decreed. So the Jewish elders continued successfully with the building under the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah son of Iddo. Okay, we've talked about what this means, descendant of Iddo. They finished the building according to the command of the God of Israel and the decrees of Cyrus, Darius, and King Artaxerxes of Persia. Okay, see how familiar all this is? But wait, there's more. This house was completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Haman cast lots to determine when the mass genocide of the Jews was to take place. It also happened to fall upon the month of Adar. And so this is a storied month in Jewish history because it's also when it was when construction was completed. So if we back up to verse 14, they finished the building according to the command of the God of Israel and the decrees of Cyrus, Darius, and King Artaxerxes of Persia. It's fascinating that Artaxerxes is mentioned here at all because this is 50 years after the completion of the construction. We know this because the very next verse says the house was completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. All right, so this frames our boy Xerxes, Ahasuerus, in our study of the book of Esther, and we know that it overlaps then with the ministries of Haggai, that's a book of the Bible, and Zechariah, that's a book of the Bible. These are the prophets who were there ministering to the people of God during construction, and as they heard from the word of the Lord, they prospered in everything that they did. Look at this. It's done under the command, according to the command of the God of Israel and the decrees of Cyrus, Darius, and King Artaxerxes of Persia. So huge theological implications to this because bottom line is God said it's going to happen. All right, because God decreed it, that's what's going to take place. But it's also in the best interest of Persia that the decrees of their kings, okay, which are named here Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes. It's a good thing for Persia that those kings' decrees align with what God commanded, because what God commands is going to come to pass when it comes to his Old Testament people of Israel. But wait, there's more. Who's missing in this lineup? Okay, we've got Cyrus, the founding king. We got a couple of generations later, and then there's Darius. And then we skip a familiar name when we arrive at Artaxerxes. So who's missing here? The book of Esther takes place where this word "and" is. So God had commanded it. The kings had decreed it. Artaxerxes was out of line with his predecessors and his successor, evidently. And it was in his best interest to let the people of God do what the people of God do, to not interfere with the will of God. So, if you feel distressed by the political scene, if it feels like things are getting crazier and crazier, and the government couldn't get any farther from God, and we've lost touch with our roots, remember this context for the book of Esther, seen right here in the book of Ezra. Even governments who lose their way and forget their roots can come back again. Remember, God is absolutely in control.